Hello, welcome back. Right, in this video you'll be pleased to know there will be no cat because he's upstairs. The dog's just down there, but he's staying away from me because he had 7 teeth out the other day and I still don't think he's forgiven me. Right, the topic of this video is, as you can see, it's Space Harrier for the Amstrad, Commodore 64 and the ZX Spectrum. I don't know what that strange drilling noise is. It's been going on for about half an hour. So you'll have to forgive me. It's probably one of the neighbours. Now, first things first, my Spectrum died. So I can't bring you the Div MMC and ZXAY full review as I teased on YouTube yesterday. I really do apologise for that, and I apologise to Ben from Bike Delight for that. I'm going to have to delay that for some time until I can get the 3 dead Spectrums that I've got now repaired. But in the meantime I can use Spectaculator. I'm not anti emulation at all. In many ways, Spectaculator, its recording mode is better than just pointing a video camera at the screen, because you get a better quality image, I find. But anyway, I hope you don't find it too off-putting. I will of course add commentary on top of that segment. But the running order is Amstrad CPC, Commodore 64, ZX Spectrum. Deliberately putting those two first because I don't know them. Today was the first time I've ever tried playing them. And as ever, it's the idea of this is just to show you what they're all like, the similarities and differences between them. These home versions were released by Elite Software in 1986, I believe, based on Sega's very famous coin-op game, which I played a couple of times, but only ever lasted about 45 seconds each time I played it, so I'm not massively familiar with the arcade game. Now, home arcade conversions, there were some fantastic ones on the 8-bit machines, some of which I'll cover over the coming weeks. Ones that stand out: Chase HQ, R-Type, Gauntlet, and various others that now I've realised I haven't written them down. I can't remember them. So anyway, shout out as and when we get to each particular sort of segment if it was the version that you owned, what your thoughts of it were, and by all means comment on what you think of the other versions. That's what it's all about, and we'll see you at the end. Okay, so here we go. This is the Amstrad CPC 464 version of Space Harrier. Now, up until today, I'm completely unfamiliar with this version of the game, like I said. Right, okay, first things first, first impressions. It's nice and colourful by the look of things, and also a real sort of godsend. I've been critical recently about the lack of music and sound in some Amstrad games. You can already hear there's a really nice tune going on which goes through the game, so that's really good to hear. I mean, Paperboy, another Elite conversion, had no sound whatsoever. It was like you were playing it in a vacuum, and Mikey didn't have much on it either. Right, okay, I've redefined my keys, QAOP in space for fire. Now, this version that I have downloaded appears to inadvertently be one that's got infinite lives. So I apologise for that. I'm still going to be really useless at it. Let's get into it. So it's fire to start. Now, first impressions when I first saw this, I've been playing this for about an hour, were, oh my god, what is this? Because you'll see, if you're familiar with the arcade and sort of like versions on more powerful machines, the sort of graphics, apart from your main sprite and the backgrounds, are all done in a kind of vector style. And it, you know, to start with, it looks sort of quite messy, but it zips along quite well. The main sprite is really sort of quite animated, if a little clunky and blocky, but it's colourful enough, and as you can hear, you know, you've got that sort of music and the sort of sound effects going through, etc. It's a little tricky to sort of see what's going on because of that graphical style, because obviously the objects like the trees that I've just gone face first into are all see-through. So you can tell also that I'm really not good at this game at all. Now, yes, it looks ugly, but the thing is it visibly Space Harrier? And yes, it is. And does it play badly? Not badly, no. Once you get sort of used to the sort of nuances and stuff, and the fact that things can get pretty tricky to see what's going on, you can see that it's it's an okay conversion, even if it does look like not a lot really. So yeah, I mean it's playable enough, I suppose. I was never a huge, I didn't have much. Now look here, we're coming to the boss battle, the first one, this giant worm, and look at this representation of it. It's a pretty yeah, sort of garish and stuff, and you can't really make out any sort of detail as to what it is or what it's supposed to be. Like I say, I mean everything's moving all right, and you know, we've gone on to another stage now, so I'm presuming, please someone fill me in if I'm wrong, that the vector style has been used to keep things moving along at a fair old nip. Like I say, it's not ideal. It doesn't look like the greatest Amstrad game, but it's certainly oh, hang on, what's going on here? You can see there, you know, it just gets very, very difficult to see what's going on. But you know, I sort of stuck with it a bit, and you know, that's the thing. I mean, when you realise how powerful the original arcade machine was, compared to, you know, you've got 48K version for the Spectrum and 64K versions on the Amstrad and Commodore 64, you will see that you know, it's a passable, I suppose, representation of it, and you know, compromises have had to be made just to get the game into any kind of state where it could be released. Now, come on, like I say, I mean the big thing for me is that the vector style does mean that, you know, because you can see things approaching from behind things, because you can see right through everything, it just makes it that bit more sort of confusing for the eyes. But you know, I've played, in my 30 odd years of playing games, I've played sort of far worse games than this. You know, jumping straight out from the top of my head would be the Spectrum conversion of Kung Fu Master, which is hideous. At least this has got playability, you know, and it is playable, nice and colourful, like I said. So there isn't really an awful lot more of Space Harrier on the Amstrad to show you. Now, I'm aware it came out on 16 bits and consoles and stuff like that, but the only prior experience I have of Space Harrier is quick going in an arcade many years ago, when I think whatever money I put into it was gone within sort of like 30 seconds because I was no good at it. And the Spectrum version, which I have covered. Right, here's another giant worm thing. Now, it's just a bit of a mess, that, isn't it? This is supposed to be like a boss battle. But yeah, I mean, that's not great, is it? Right, anyway, okay, that's enough of the Amstrad version. I'm going to move on next. We'll have the Commodore 64 version. Okay, right, here we are, Commodore 64 version of Space Harrier. There's me right at the top of the scoreboard there. Everyone else on it must have been really crap if I'm at the top. I'm completely unfamiliar with this version of the game, apart from the very quick go I've just had to familiarise myself with it. Right, let's get going. First things first, I really really like the graphical style on display here. Everything is shifting around sort of really well. Nothing's getting sort of too cluttered that you can't see anything of what's going on, etc. Which was a problem I found with the Amstrad version, which we've just seen, because of the vector style that it uses for its graphics. Here everything is solid. There's some really good music sort of playing in the background, etc. Don't know if you can hear that. Let's try turning it up a bit. Yeah, this is, and it's really fast. Now, Commodore owners, that had this back in the day, thoughts and impressions, please. Similarly, Spectrum and Amstrad owners, if you've never seen this version before, what do you make of it? Oh, bloody hell. It's quite sort of dark in tone, not sort of bright or vivid, but you know, everything is, there's a really good amount of detail on some of the enemies and stuff, and you know, like I said, everything is sort of like a bit of a breakneck speed, really, and it's, you know, sort of first impression, you know, it's not easy. I've never found Space Harrier an easy game to play. I've always found aiming quite difficult on it because of the sort of in the screen sort of mechanic that's used. Now here is the sort of first boss, and oh blimey, remember how he looked in the Amstrad version and compare that to this, and you know, the difference is quite stark, really. So I'm through there, and I'm now onto the second stage, sort of running along the sort of ground to start with. Oh dear, these columns on this one go really sort of quite now look at the detail on some of those faces. I think that is great. Whoa. Oh dear. Right, I seem to have 9 men now. Aye, come on. Oh. Now, is this something that's new to you? You know, or have you hunted down Space Harrier over the years, played it on loads and loads of different versions? Or are these the only versions you ever saw and were familiar with, never ever to play them again? If so, is what you're seeing oh dear, enough to make you consider sort of trying it again? It's really, wow. Oh, damn. Really frantic, but not unenjoyable. Like I said, it's not my favourite game ever, and it won't be something I sort of revisit frequently, but it is really good, bearing in mind what they're trying to pull off here on 64K. Bear in mind what the host arcade version was. Alright, here we go. Some really, oh whoa, I don't even know what's going on here now. Oh right, okay, don't fly face first into them things. Flying first, head first into those things is bad. Oh! Right, come on. No, is this some kind of bonus level or something? I don't know. Oh! Come on. Oh dear, coming up to last life. Oh, right, there we go, that was Space Harrier on the Commodore 64. We're going to move on to the ZX Spectrum. See you in a second. Hello, right, here we go, the ZX Spectrum version of Space Harrier, again released by Elite Systems in 1986, based on the famous Sega arcade game. This is a bit unusual, it's a bit strange, difficult to get used to back on Spectaculator, but you know, we'll make of it what we can. Right, and recording over it as well, you obviously aren't going to get my live reactions on it, so this is just to show you how it fares against the Commodore 64 and Amstrad versions of the game, which you have already seen. Now, as you can see, the detail on the main character is really quite nice. The detail on some of the obstacles and objects are really quite nice too. Doesn't seem to be many trees on this version. There were on the Commodore and Amstrad versions, although the Amstrad graphics were vector graphics, as you saw.
Everything moves quite quickly. Sound wise it's quite limited. There's just the normal sort of like little firing squibbly sort of sounds. But it doesn't play badly, but the problems with this game are obviously the Spectrum's graphical limitations. Now you can see in the bottom half of the screen, to convey movement, they've used a kind of checkerboard effect, which works well, but when you're on that part of the screen, you can see things are really, really difficult to see. And sometimes when characters or objects bunch up close together, then they become a sort of a bit of a mess. If you recall back from when I did the Tapper comparison video, when the customers, when there were two or more customers in a row there, you could see on the Spectrum version, because of only able to sort of like show them in black and white, things became a bit difficult to see and read how many characters there actually were for you to pour the drinks. But you know, it plays well enough, like I've said. It's not a game I'm hugely fond of. I believe I've already mentioned that too. I have covered the Spectrum version of Space Harrier about 2 years ago, and I think that was the last time I played it, so that shows how sort of frequently I return to it. Now I believe it sold really, really well. For all the machines that it came out on, or the 8-bits, the versions that you've seen, it's a really, really sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Bold conversion to sort of try and undertake, bearing in mind the graphical prowess of the arcade machine. Now, did you own this for your Spectrum back in the day? If you did, what are your thoughts, etc.? I remember it being quite heavily covered in the magazines prior to its release, the Crash, the sort of Sinclair User, Your Sinclair, etc. And I know of a few people who bought it. I wasn't one of them. But anyway, I think I've shown you enough of the Spectrum version for you to make your own judgment. It's not an unplayable game by any stretch of the imagination, but it isn't the best arcade conversion on the Specky. It's, as a technical achievement, it's really, really, really good. Bearing in mind, this is all running in 48K. You know, there's no enhanced 128K sort of version that came out, so you know, big up to them for pulling off something that's at least playable. Now, Space Harrier 2 I have no experience of, might cover that at some point, but I'm not in that much of a rush to get to it. Right, just going to let this segment play out a little bit further, and then we'll get to the outro. See you in a sec.
Okay, so there you have it, 3 different versions of Space Harrier. Now, let's go through them and share my thoughts from the Amstrad version. When I first saw it, I thought, oh my god, what is this? I really didn't like the look of it at all, the fact that they'd used vectors, vector graphics for the sort of obstacles and enemies, etc. I thought at times it looked like a bit of a mess. Having said that, it was really, really good to see an Amstrad game with plentiful sound effects and music playing throughout it. Decent soundtrack as well. It's like I said, I've been critical of Amstrad games in the past that were totally devoid in some instances of any kind of sonics. Really, really, it played okay, but it looked, you know, really sort of not good at all. It went along at a fair lick, and I presume that's why they did what they did with the graphics, to keep some kind of to maintain some kind of speed in the game. The main sprite was drawn okay, and it was quite colourful, as you saw. But yeah, moving on to the Commodore 64 version, I was really impressed with that. The way that moved, the way that looked, and the way it sounded. It was quite fast, a bit too fast for my eyes and stuff. That's my fault, not the game's. And I thought out of the 3, that was the best version on display. The detail on some of the enemies, etc., was really, really, really good. And it looked and resembled the game, which is all you can ask from an arcade conversion. Is it identifiably Space Harrier? The Spectrum version, which was the only sort of home one I'd played, yeah, as a technical achievement, it's really good. It suffered again with the same kind of thing, but for different reasons that the Amstrad version suffered with, which was the graphics. At times they were messy, although sort of like well defined when they were you know, sort of on their own. When they disappeared into the checkerboard ground pattern that sort of gives you the sense of speed, things became very, very hard to see. when things were close together, it became kind of like a little bit of a mess. Overall, the speed was really good, not much sound going on wise on the Spectrum, but playable enough, and that's all you can ask for, really. So, yeah, I'd have to say out of the three, the Commodore 64, then the Spectrum, then the Amstrad version. Now, it's not to say the Amstrad version was horrifically unplayable. It was playable, you know. I did play it for a good 15-20 minutes, but it's not something I think I'll go back to. Whereas the Commodore 64 version, yeah, it's got great soundtrack, very good speed, very good detail on the graphics. Yeah, might revisit that again at some point. I mean, it's not my favourite game, Space Harrier, so it's a bit difficult to say. Now, I did have a look at versions of Outrun, because that's going to be a video coming up soon, and also trying to get Chase HQ. But unfortunately, the only thing I can find for the Amstrad only gives you the loading screen. It won't seem to go any further. And that's one I really want to check out, because it's fantastic on the Spectrum. And I believe it's brilliant on the Amstrad as well, but I can't speak for the Commodore 64 version. I've never played it. But anyway, that's the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please let me know. If you wish to subscribe, please do so. But if you do subscribe, please take the time to join in with the discussion in the comments, because that's what it's all about. Okay, see you at the next round. Bye.